I grew up, not just gardening, but also being out in nature a lot. It was also, a really important part of my childhood was just mucking around, in the weeds or whatever. And my parents always really instilled a value of protecting nature and being connected with local wildlife. My mom is a very avid birder. I really love bugs. In terms of environmentalism, that a lot of people imagine that protecting nature has to happen in the wilderness. Nature can seem like something that's far away. And I think one of the most beautiful things about being in the garden and spending time there is realizing how much nature is around us all the time. And how many things that we can positively influence just by growing a garden, just by having, native wildflowers, just by, not mowing your lawn the first thing in May or whatever. There's all kinds of little actions and little steps that can protect the nature that's like all around us all the time. Most of my artwork starts with gardening. So in the garden, growing stuff, looking at things, but I take a lot of pictures on my phone. It's like to capture a moment, like I'm in the garden working away and then I see something and I'm like, oh, that looks nice. And then the second step of that would sometimes be in the kitchen. So, preparing something in the kitchen and having a similar kind of thought of like, something looks, perfect the way it is or whatever. So for my show, Propagation, some of the things I was thinking about was family and tradition and how families pass on knowledge, learning how to grow it, but also learning ways of taking care of each other with food, the ways that can extend to a community. So I think a garden can become a really lovely kind of metaphor for the connections between people, as well as a very practical expression of kind of ways to connect with other people and show care for other people. So a lot of my work is pretty realistic. There's quite a few black and white portraits, which are all kind of drawn from portrait photography. And then there is colored prints and drawings of food and plants. All my drawings are in pencil crayon. So, high pigment pencil crayon. But what I kind of like about my style is, even though I'm translating from a photograph, I'm picking up or exaggerating the things that are most important to me. So often they start to look kind of better than life in a way. Brighter, more colorful, more light. Some small details which would maybe get kind of passed over in a photograph get highlighted through my drawing process. So I've thought of it as kind of pop art in a way, this kind of almost advertising-like aesthetic of like stark white backgrounds and objects that are like really popping off with bright colors and, glossy, and just to make it seem super appealing to really show off the rewards of kind of what I'm doing in the garden. So the name of my exhibit is Propagation, which is a fun word. I like words as well. So propagation can refer to like reproductive processes in plants, but it can also refer to reproduction in families, to propagate your own family. And then in addition, it can also refer to propaganda, so like the spreading of an idea. So depending on whether I'm doing a drawing or a print, if I'm doing a print, I have to plan out my colors and break it down. So it's a little bit more, I can't do everything that way. And then things that I really love that won't work as prints, I'll generally make drawings. And in terms of printmaking, there's a couple different types of printmaking that I do. So one is called silk screening, which a lot of folks are kind of familiar with as an industrial process. But essentially it's a stencil. So each color would be printed separately. I'll start with however many pieces of paper, 20 or whatever, and print all one color on all of them. And then they have to dry and then print the next color all the way until it's done. So depending on how many colors, that's how many times I've had to go over it. And then what I use for the stencil is my own drawing. So I'll draw each colored layer separately, expose it onto the screen, and then print each color one at a time. And lino is a little bit different. It's, or relief printing, it's a plate of this kind of rubbery stuff that I carve. And so in that case, I'm carving away at any of the kind of white space or the negative space. And the particular kind of relief printing that I do is called reduction. So it's the same plate carved multiple times. So, first layer and then carve away whatever you want to stay that first layer's color. And then you do the next color and the next, so on and so forth. It's a logistical acrobatic. It's because you have to plan. The colors aren't totally opaque, they're somewhat transparent. So you have to start with the lightest color and kind of build your way up to the darkest. It has this like richness of color and light that you just can't get from any other kind of printmaking. I built the exhibition to have as many kind of connections between pieces as possible. So there is a small written kind of narrative that goes with the show, which talks about just my personal history with this house and the garden space and my childhood and my parenting and stuff like that. But even without reading that, there's lots of little, usually in the titles, connections between works. So there's a piece called My Tomatoes in My Grandmother's Colander. So it's talking about my grandmother, and then elsewhere in the exhibition there is a drawing of my grandmother in her own garden. In the drawing of my daughter, her name is Virginia Ellen. It says Virginia Ellen in the garden. And then elsewhere in the exhibition is a drawing of my great aunt Ellen. So you get that connection of like, oh, my daughter's named after my great aunt, and she's there in her garden as well. So there's just these little kind of clues, I guess, to the bigger picture. So there's lots of kind of ways to create that story by looking at how the pieces are connected to each other. So the exhibition is traveling southern Saskatchewan through OSAC. It started touring in 2023, and it will be touring until 2025. When I have an exhibition, or when folks have seen my work and I get to talk to them about it, and they tell me, about what they're growing, or their memories of growing up in a garden, or their favorite food to eat with their family. There just seems to be so much to connect with people about, so much like common ground, that it can be this really lovely like community building act as well, even though it seems like when I'm by myself drawing, it doesn't seem that exciting, but as soon as it's out in the world, and I get to talk to people about what it means to them or what it reminds them of, that's really like fulfilling and really validating.
Are you an artist who's interested in appearing on maxTV Local? Let us know at SaskTel.com/local.